There we go.
Is it okay with everyone if I pop this door open so she can go back and forth?
It's fine with me.
Yeah.
1, 2, check, check. All right.
We're good.
Yeah, we'll wait for Caesar to get back. And then we'll jump in. All right, so for anyone watching online, welcome. Pretty much all of the in-person people are traveling right now, so it's mostly just you. But this is the last night of the year we have to do this, so we're forging ahead even without much in-person attendance. We have Lloyd and Caesar here on the computer, so if you want to type in anything, they can read it to me and we can try to respond to it. But we're going to make sure that we get through the book of Proverbs. And then next week will be the Thanksgiving Eve service at 7 o'clock. And that will be broadcast on YouTube as well if you can't make it in person. And then the week after that will be an Advent already, so we'll be having our Advent midweek services throughout December. We'll be doing a potluck at 6, and then the service will be at 7. So please join us for that as well. But I wanted to make sure we finish Proverbs before we go into that, and then sometime in January after I recover from Christmas, we will start going through the book of Job and, like I said, round out the wisdom literature stuff. And that's about as much as I have to play for time until Caesar comes back. So we'll just awkwardly stand here for a little bit. So 31, half of it was on the back of the last handout we had, and the second half of 31 is on the handout that's on the chair there. So Caesar's back. Let's jump in. All right. So Proverbs 31. Your Bible has the little headlines. It'll say the words of King Lemuel. And verse 1 tells us the words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. So we are possibly introducing a new author as our final book of the Proverbs, as it, again, finally gets compiled as other writers add on to it at a later date. This would be the last edition. So the name Lemuel means dedicated to God. And so some people think that this was just a pseudonym of Solomon's. And so this is just another collection of stuff Solomon said that gets added on later on in history. There is a historical Lemuel who is the king of Massa and a descendant of Ishmael. So again, he wouldn't be an Israelite, he would be a cousin to the Israelites, because Ishmael was the half-brother of Isaac, who becomes the progenitor of the Arabs, basically, if I'm remembering correctly. And so if that's who it is, we don't really know much about him historically, other than he's maybe the author of a chapter of Proverbs, and apparently his mother was an oracle, or you might say a prophetess. She received some kind of divine revelation from God and then fulfilled her motherly duty of passing wisdom on to her son, as the book of Proverbs has been entreating women to do throughout. And then he recorded some of this wisdom down here, and then it gets tacked on to the end of the book at some point in time. So, some scholars also think that Lemuel might be a pseudonym for Hezekiah or Josiah, later kings that you get in Israel. So we know this is attributed to Lemuel, but we don't know for sure who the Lemuel is. But again, as some editor was finally compiling everything into the official book of Proverbs under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, this made the cut as well, so we're going to go through it. So the first section, the first 9 verses, is giving us 3 bits of advice for kings. So assuming Lemuel is a king, all the potential people are kings. He's either King Lemuel of Massa, or he's King Solomon, or he's King Hezekiah, or he's King Josiah. He was raised to be a king, and his mother is imparting wisdom to him on things that a king should do. And so he's giving 3 pieces of advice for kings based on what his mother taught him growing up. So first we have verse 2. What are you doing, my son? What are you doing, son of my womb? What are you doing, son of my vows? So here is, assuming this is his mother's teaching being passed on to him, the mother is opening with 3 questions, again getting to that responsibility she has towards him as her mother. So 1, she has the responsibility to raise him in her role as a mother. What are you doing, my son? 2, she's emphasizing the biological connection to him. What are you doing, son of my womb? So she's recognizing he came from her womb. This is not just a role she accepted for herself or took out of pride. It's one that comes from a natural order. She is the biological mother. She has a biological responsibility to him. There is an expectation within nature itself that she will be a mother to him because she has borne him. And then 3rd, what are you doing, son of my vows? So there's some form of vow happening here, and it's a little bit murky what vow that is. It could be a reference to the marriage vows, and again, recognizing what we talked about last week with marriage being a bedrock to society, and how it is a divine mystery instituted by God, and how God refers to the 2 become one flesh. In a sense, that is the offspring where 2 people join together and one offspring comes out, and so a recognition again of not only the biological responsibility she has to her son, but also this divinely mandated responsibility she has as the mystery of marriage has produced the fruit of her son. And again, going back to the fact that the name Lemuel itself means dedicated to God, it could be that she had made some kind of vow to God about a child that she would potentially conceive. This might be something like what we see with Hannah, mother of Samuel. So remember, Hannah is barren, and she makes the vow to God, if you let me have a child, I will dedicate him to you. And God gives her a child, and she dedicates him to God. Samuel is handed over to the temple to be raised there, and basically gets adopted as a Levite and becomes a priest as one dedicated to God. And so Lemuel being the son of the vow might mean that she had made some kind of vow to dedicate him to God in some way. Again, all of this is pointing us back to the opening sections of Proverbs, where again we have this repeated sense of responsibility of parents towards their children to raise them up in the way they should go, to teach them wisdom, to teach them how they should compose themselves. And so she is recognizing as the mother of a future king, she has a responsibility to make sure he is properly instructed on how a king should act. And so this is, again, she's opening her advice by recalling the opening advice of Proverbs itself to tie it all together. Which now brings us into verse 3, her first bit of advice. Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. So as we've seen throughout the book of Proverbs, we have another warning against adultery here, and recognizing a king is especially susceptible to forms of adultery, because men with power and wealth and prestige can attract women who are drawn to power and wealth and prestige. And if you're the king, you're a lot less likely to have people saying, hey, you probably shouldn't do that. You're more likely to have a bunch of yes men around who are going to encourage you even in your vices. And as we see with Solomon, it's apparently not too hard for a king to have his own harem, but that does lead to downfall in multiple ways. It happens to Solomon where he takes on all these foreign wives and they lead him towards the foreign gods, and that's a big reason why he kind of ends his life on a sour note. He ends up setting up his kingdom for breaking in the civil war. Even if you're not a king, having lots of women around, it doesn't really create harmony within the household. It creates jealousy and infighting and women ranking each other and all sorts of issues. And so she's recognizing, as a king, you may be very tempted towards women, and women will be very available to them, but don't give into that temptation. Don't give your strength to them. That's the way that kings can be destroyed. It leads to a downfall. So you have the practical matter, like what we see with Solomon, how the women draw him astray to foreign gods, and that causes issues. Spiritually speaking, if you're constantly indulging in the pursuit of women, you're not really holding up the sixth commandment, but you're also embracing sin. Again, this is kind of our warning whenever it comes to any kind of ethics, especially sexual ethics, is it's not that it's a worse sin than all the other sins, but when you claim it as your identity and you don't even recognize it as a sin anymore, then you're not going to repent of it, and that's what makes it so dangerous. And if he gives himself over to this kind of womanizing lifestyle, then he's going to be indulging in sin rather than repenting of it, and that's going to cause all sorts of issues. And again, remember the last chapter's one of the central themes was on how marriage and the family are the fundamental building blocks of society. And if he's upsetting the family by being polygamous or just having lots of women, that's going to be upsetting for society as well. And then thirdly, we do have his responsibility as the king. As the king, he is expected to be a model for his citizens and show them the way he's supposed to live, and it's an example of how they should live. It's really hard for mothers to teach their sons, hey, sons, don't be a womanizer. The kids can say, but the king's a womanizer, and things are going really well for him. The king is supposed to be a moral leader for Israel, even if it doesn't always work out that way. And so there's that extra responsibility as the king. He's supposed to show the people what loyalty and a good marriage look like so that they will imitate that rather than, again, being a bad person where good things are still happening to him, and that encourages people to say, well, he does bad things and stuff works out great for him, so we should do bad things as well. Is this all making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I'm a little bit scatterbrained. 4 through 7 give us the next warning. This is fine. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine or for rulers to take strong drink, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed and pervert the rights of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to one who is perishing and wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty and open their misery no more. So here we have another section talking about alcohol and its uses and cautions against certain uses. So this is a warning of about the abuse of alcohol. This is also a reminder of how we need to approach the wisdom genre as a whole. I think I told this story towards the start of the study, but I got sucked into an online debate with a teetotaler who was insisting that you can't be a Christian and drink alcohol at the same time because alcohol is a complete sin. And like everyone's pointing out, various arguments against that position. Jesus makes wine for a whole bunch of people. He gives wine to his disciples. God gives wine people at various times. Wine is used as imagery of the victory feast that God prepares for us in Isaiah's vision and all this stuff. And one of the guys, one of the foundations of his argument against wine was this verse in 31. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine or for rulers to take strong drink. So he takes this verse here, and then he says, well, Jesus is the King of Kings. And Proverbs 31 says a king shouldn't be drinking wine, and Jesus is the King of Kings. Obviously, Jesus never drank wine, and therefore all of your verses saying that he did drink wine or that he gave wine to people are wrong. And that's just not how the book of Proverbs works. This is wisdom literature. It's following trends and advice. It's not setting up hard and fast rules that have to be followed to the letter. This is not the Torah, it's wisdom literature. And so what she's saying here is not, it is forbidden for anyone who is a king to ever drink wine. She's saying if you're going to be a king, recognize you have responsibilities and your words have power, and if you're going to be going into a position where you're going to be making some kind of royal decree or judgment, make sure you're doing it sober. Don't give in to wine so that you're doing your duties while you're impaired. She's not saying you're not allowed to have a glass of wine at dinner or anything like that.
Balance is a good thing. Balance is a good thing.
Yeah, balance is a good thing. So you need to recognize that wisdom literature is about nuance and trends and general life advice, not making hard and fast rules to be followed exactly to the letter like you might have in the Torah. So the fact that you have this verse saying it is not for kings to drink wine, it is not an argument to say, oh, therefore Jesus never drank wine and no Christian should drink wine either. Again, it's recognizing that, as the king, he's got a fair amount of wealth, he has a fair amount of access. He's going to have rich wine cellars, and he might really enjoy wine, and it would be very easy for him to overindulge and become an alcoholic, and that would hamper his ability to be a good king and rule justly. And so the warning is not, kings are never allowed to drink wine no matter what. The warning is, everyone should be drinking responsibly, but especially if you are in a position of authority, make sure you're not abusing alcohol, so you are clear-minded when you're doing your job in your rulership. Because if you are becoming a lush and you're constantly impaired with alcohol, you might, she gives examples of the consequences. You might forget the good decrees, or you might accidentally issue bad ones. So you might, a king might get drunk and say, hey, he was following the speed limit, arrest him for that. And, hopefully he has good advisors who are like, you shouldn't arrest people for following the speed limit. That's why we have a speed limit. But if he surrounded himself by yes men who are just going to blindly do whatever the king says, then they're going to be like, hey, sorry, man, the king doesn't like the speed limit for some reason today, so you got to go to prison now. So he might forget the good decrees and thus hamper his ability to rule justly, or he might start to issue bad ones. So he might get drunk and get up on his throne and be like, all right, everyone, from now on, the donkeys get to ride you. Royal stamp, it's the law. It's like, well, that's a royal decree now. I'm making up weird examples, but it's that idea. If you're in a position of authority where your word is going to have power, you need to recognize the responsibility of that and make sure that you're approaching it soberly, not doing. So again, you're allowed to drink even if you're a king, but you need to do it responsibly at the appropriate times. We've had earlier Proverbs was like, the problem isn't the king who feasts, the problem is the king who feasts in the morning, who just wakes up and starts indulging himself right away without making sure that the issues of the day are taken care of in the first place. And then the other issue with this guy who's like trying to say that this verse is saying that alcohol is always bad and no Christian should ever drink, is you then have to kind of contend with verse 6 and 7. Give strong drink to the one who is perishing and wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty and remember their misery no more. So while we have this warning against the overindulgence of alcohol and again against drunkenness, we do have a recognition that wine does have a proper use. Wine is a small pleasure that can help to uplift the spirits of those who are in otherwise dire straits. This is not an excuse to be drunk, but rather it's saying you're allowed to have a drink to take the edge off. When a person is dying, give them something for the pain. You don't need to make them suffer just because we're called to always be sober-minded. So again, the wisdom genre is about finding the nuance between verses that seem to be contradicting themselves. So verse 4 is saying, hey, don't drink wine. And then verse 6 and 7 says, sometimes you need to drink wine. And so the wisdom then comes in recognizing that this isn't saying, oh, the Bible's contradicting itself, rather than saying, oh, they're saying there are times when it's appropriate to drink and there are times when it's not appropriate to drink. And so if I'm going to drink, I need to use my wisdom and recognize, is this a time when it's appropriate to drink, or is it one of the times where it's not appropriate to drink, and then act accordingly. Still making sense? Mm-hmm.
Plus, for kings, so many incidents in history where winning armies got sacked on the night of the winning feast. Mm. Because they get drunk.
So wait until you're back in your own castle and you're safe.
Yep.
It's easier, don't drink until you're 21. That's just the law.
Yeah.
This then marks a transition point in the third saying. It's kind of the poetry of how it's all set up. So the first saying is an outright prohibition. Don't give in to loose women, stay away from them. The second one is a prohibition followed by an encouragement of proper use. So the first rule is don't indulge with loose women. The second one is don't drink wine irresponsibly, but there are times when you can drink wine. And then the third one is going to shift it to a purely encouragement bit of advice. As we get to verses 8 and 9. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. So again, this has been a running theme throughout Proverbs whenever they're talking to kings and how those in authority should rule, is you should also recognize you need to care for the needy. Not only care for the needy and uphold justice and treat them fairly, even if they're not as wealthy as other people. That's been a running theme throughout Proverbs. But also there's this command to help give them the benefit of small comforts, which we saw in verse 7, give wine to those in very distress, let them drink and forget their poverty, not just their bad life situation, but for those, again, it can be a small comfort. You don't have much else going for you. And again, this isn't saying, well, hobos are allowed to be drunk or anything like that. But it's just saying, this is something, it's a small gesture you can do, but it helps, and you should, out of your Christian love, be trying to help those who need it. So not only should he care about the needy and give them the benefit of the small comforts, such as the wines we saw ahead, but then he also has to take that extra step and make sure he's actually standing up for them, defending them, even when there's more powerful or more influential people that are accusing them. Again, the king is called to oversee justice, and justice is supposed to be blind. It's supposed to be impartial, regardless of whether it's a rich or a poor person on which side. So the king shouldn't be partial just to the rich, but defends the outcast as well, defending the rights of all people. That's the positive command for the king versus the warning of the other two bits of advice from God. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Any questions on verses 1 through 9 before we get to our last section? All right. So now we get to the Proverbs 31 moment. So the book of Proverbs closes with a final poem about the ideal wife, and we're going to kind of go through this pretty much verse by verse. So if you're reading this in Hebrew, it is an acrostic poem, which means that when they're writing it down, they wrote down the Hebrew alphabet on the page, and then they had each line start with the next line, or the next letter in the alphabet. Obviously, it doesn't work that way with the English translation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an acrostic poem. It's a form that they didn't have. We don't know for sure who the author is. Some people think it's Lemuel himself. Some people think it's a writing Solomon did that gets tacked on at the end to kind of balance out Lemuel. Might have been. Some people think it's whoever the anonymous final editor was, the one who decided to include Lemuel's writings at the end of the book of Proverbs. But it is a comprehensive. It kind of calls back the whole book and a lot of the themes that we've had so far. And it's going to give us the description of the godly wife or the excellent wife, the wife who embodies all of the wisdom that has been espoused throughout the book of Proverbs. Some people think it's a continuation of that personification of wisdom that we had earlier in the books, in which case it's talking about Jesus. However, there's plenty of people who will say, no, it's not about Lady Wisdom, because Lady Wisdom is never described as a wife to somebody else, and so this is just recommending a wife who exemplifies the traits of Lady Wisdom, but isn't Lady Wisdom herself. And we've had plenty of proverbs where we have warnings against, warnings about being careful about who you choose to marry, and so then it closes out with, like, this is the kind of woman you should be looking for in a woman that you're going to marry. The structure of this poem recalls Augur's numerical grouping. So remember, we read Augur's Proverbs last week, and he had everything in kind of numeric list. Everything was like groupings of 3 to 4. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of numerology happening in this section. There's 7 groupings of 9 traits, I think, if I'm remembering my numbers correctly, but it's very organized for those who are really good at examining poetry. I'm not good at examining poetry, and so I can't really keep it in my head. If you really want, email me and I can send you the commentary pages that get you the actual structure of the poem. There's some people who think that it was placed at the very end to kind of counteract verse 3. The there's potentially a concern that since 31:3 says, "Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings," it might be coming across as like all women are bad, just avoid them, and so then that gets balanced out by saying, no, there are good women. This is what an ideal woman looks like. I don't know how much faith stock you want to put to that, but that is one theory that has been proposed.
When choosing a wife or a partner, most of the time the advice is to go through. It's not an easy decision. It's not a light decision. You go through it with a fine comb and
Right.
take your time.
Yeah, you think so, although technically I proposed to Magdalena on our second date, so I don't know. That's okay, baby.
Well, there is a thing about, like in the Middle East, they ask about the mother of the bride, the father of the bride, and her siblings and their cousins. They tell you there's an old saying that the easiest way to translate it, that genetics will drag to seventh son
Yeah.
or daughter.
Yeah.
So if there is somebody who's known that they're a family of troublesome people, don't go
Yeah.
near them. While there's honorable family that they're known that they are just people, they're good people in general for the society. They tell you, you're never gonna go bad with that decision.
Yeah. But yeah, so this is again the final poem of the book, the final section, and it's here to help teach women how to aspire to be good wives, while also teaching men what they should be looking for in a good wife. Again, following that trend we've seen throughout the rest of the book of Proverbs, with all the warnings about what happens when you marry a not so great wife. There's Proverbs, it's better to live on the leaky corner of the house than inside the warm house with a quarrelsome wife, or however that's exactly phrased. I'm paraphrasing. The Proverbs 31 woman is a contrast to the woman in Song of Solomon then too, because in Song of Solomon the bride is often praised for her physical beauty, whereas the Proverbs 31 woman, the only physical descriptions are the ones that are practical. Like the strength of her arms are praised because of how that helps her provide for his family. So this is, the Song of Solomon is about the beauty you find in young love. The Proverbs 31 woman is about like the
Long term.
It's about the good, the long-term, good, marriageable woman that you have grown and built a life with and has given you a home. And then the final verses are going to establish that even more important than the physical beauty that you get praised in Song of Solomon, the Proverbs 31 woman, what's most praised about her is her love of the Lord and the pursuit of wisdom that comes with that. So again, this is the capstone to everything, I guess. So we'll go through this basically verse by verse. Verse 10. An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. So this phrasing here, an excellent wife, is significant. It's only found in two other places in the Old Testament. One is in a description of Ruth, which, if Solomon did write this poem, then Ruth is his great-grandmother, if I remember correctly. So she's pretty important. She's important biblically. She'd be important to Solomon, so he might be thinking about her and kind of the traits that she upheld as he's writing praises to her. But Ruth is described as an excellent wife when she's being married to Boaz. And then Proverbs 12:4 speaks of the excellent wife. An excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who brings shame is like rottenness in his bones. So those are the only two times in the Old Testament that the phrase excellent wife gets used. And if we're looking at that verse in that 12:4 reference of Proverbs, again, she's connected to righteousness, and so the wife is excellent because she is righteous, and again, because she has wisdom, which is the knowledge of God and who you are in relationships to him, so that you have that justification through faith in him. But to recognize Ruth was made righteous because she was a faithful worshiper of God. She converted from the Moabite religion to the Israelite religion, and she traveled with Naomi and said that her God will be her God, and she becomes an excellent wife because of the righteousness she has through her faith. And again, the wisdom here is the key thing. So the excellent wife is more precious than jewels, and we've seen throughout the book of Proverbs that wisdom is more precious than jewels. The wealth of wisdom is greater than silver or gold. And so just like finding wisdom for yourself is finding a priceless treasure, finding a wife who also has proper biblical wisdom is finding a great priceless treasure as well. So that's our opening overview of what we're going to be learning about as we go through the poem. Now, verse 11, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. So the good wife is trustworthy, and she brings great gain to the husband in multiple ways, various ways you can look at that. What's interesting to note here is the word, when it says the husband will have no lack of gain, the word that gets translated to gain is, you could also translate that as spoils, as in the spoils of war, which kind of recalls, again, since this is summarizing the whole book, this recalls 1:13, where the wicked try to entice the son with the promise of spoils. But here we're seeing that the man with a good wife will have a greater reward than any of the spoils he might have gotten by going down the path of wickedness. So there's a contrast in the kind of spoils you get. Again, you can have the spoils of ill-gotten gain, or you can have the spoils of a wise life with a good wife beside you. Also, the fact that the spoils is a kind of a militaristic term is important. So even though we're talking about like the ideal woman, obviously she's going to be very feminine, there's a fair amount of masculine militaristic language used about her, which is not to say that the ideal woman is one who pretends to be a man and goes out and does the fighting and conquering, but recognizing that, just as men have our roles as protectors and fighters and conquerors and all of that, there is a feminine side to that. So the woman is still able to do her fighting and overcoming her odds and provide for her family in a way. So we're not left with this, the man goes out and does everything and the woman just sits on the couch and watches soap operas. Like the woman contributes as well, and we're getting kind of the feminine counterpart of the manly stuff that we do. And so she's providing spoils not through physical combat and conquering and taking things from other people, but instead she does her diligence in the homemaking and caring for her family. She fights the domestic tasks and comes out victorious in the end, and that creates spoils in the wealth and the richness of the household that is a home now and not just a house building.
Well, a home won't prosper without a woman,
right.
A good woman.
Yeah.
The man harvests and man brings in. It used to be it's on the woman to make it work.
Yeah.
My grandpa used always to say, if you get a good woman, no matter what you harvest, it will prosper even in storage.
Yeah.
And
we run around like chickens with our head cut off, and we do stuff, but it's disorganized. We need the woman to make sense of it all. And, like they say, it's whatever you give to a woman, she gives it back to you. So you give a woman a house, she'll give you a home. You give her a dead animal, she'll give you a meal.
But a house with a bad wife in it, he used to say, the house is like a ripped bag. No matter how much grain you dump in it, you're not gathering anything.
Yeah. So we're going to have... Sorry, I'm going to cut you off.
No, you're good.
Yeah. Like I said, we're going to have various militaristic terms applied to the Proverbs 31 woman because, again, her crowning achievement, her fundamental aspect that we're recognizing here is that she does have wisdom, and understanding true biblical wisdom as the true fear of God. In light of that, she is not going to be timid. Again, it's not saying the Proverbs 31 woman is the one who goes out and comes fights with everybody, but she's not just cowering in the house, not doing anything. She is productive in her own right. She knows her responsibilities. She does them well. She is bold in her skill. She is courageous in her faith. she's firm in her vocation. She's a wife and mother, and she does it well, exercising all of the wisdom that is at hand. So this leads us now to verse 12. She does him, her husband, good and not harm all the days of her life. So again, contrasting that to the spoils of the wicked in verse 113, those do lead you to harm, and they do shorten the days of your life. That's what we got in the opening of Proverbs. Don't fall in with the wicked. They're going to promise you lots of spoils, but it's not going to last. It's going to cause more trouble than it's worth, whereas the man who diligently pursues and finds a good wife, she's going to provide him spoils that help, that lengthen his life, that make his life more pleasurable. Because again, now he has a nice house. Mm-hmm. And again, we can look at this eschatologically. The good wife is going to help you in your walk in wisdom and help keep you in line, where the not wise woman is going to lead you astray to your temporal and eternal detriment, but the wise woman is going to help you and encourage you and help keep you on the right path to your temporal and eternal reward. And so the spoils of the wife are good for the husband all the days of his life and the next. So again, finding a good wife is good for you. Finding a not so good wife is harmful for you. So keeping that together. Verse 13, she seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. So again, she's not idle or lazy. She knows her jobs. She does them well. She's eager to work. She provides for the household. She doesn't just sit on the couch watching soap operas waiting for the husband to bring her the wool, and then I guess she'll get around to spinning it. She goes out and makes sure that the wool is available so she can see that her family is taken care of. Which leads into 14 and 15. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maiden. So the wise woman, in her wisdom and understanding of biblical wisdom, has self-sacrificial love. She doesn't give up when it's inconvenient, but she is diligent to make sure everyone's provided for, even if she has to look long and far. Even if she has to make sure that stuff is brought from a long way away, she makes sure that it is there and people are taken care of. And it's worth noting here in verse 15, it says she provides food for her household, and the word for food has the connotation of, if you're translating directly, it's really prey. So you have this hunting imagery around her. And again, not necessarily the woman goes out and actually hunts the deer, but that she has that same drive and perseverance as a hunter, pursuing the goal to make sure that food is brought home to her family. So you have, again, that the feminine side of the very militaristic language that we usually associate with men. She makes sure that the food is there one way or another. And not only is she providing food for herself and her family, but even the servants of the household. So she not only provides food for her household, but also portions for her maidens. So the wise woman who has true biblical wisdom, which again means she knows who God is, she knows her relationship to him, she recognizes that God is the God who serves. And so Jesus in the upper room, he says the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. And then he washes the disciples' feet to show how they are supposed to be serving others, to humble themselves, not to say, oh, we're apostles, give us lots of gold and jewels, and then we'll tell you how to get into heaven, but rather to say, you're my apostles, go out into the world and show the love that I have shown you. And so the wise woman who understands this, likewise, is self-sacrificial. She makes sure that her servants are fed as well. She doesn't say, oh, your servants, you can have whatever scraps you can find after we're done eating. She says, I want to make sure that you are fed and taken care of as well.
Well, it used to be a man and a woman, once they make their vows as a marriage, they become one.
Yeah.
So they both care. The man, when he goes out and harvest or work or labor, he's thinking about his home and how to provide for his home.
Yeah.
She is at home and she's thinking how the best way to manage this stuff to make the best out of it. A thrifty wife will make the house run much, much smoother. Yeah. And I'm not saying thrifty in a meaning like cheap. No,
but that
knowledge of management.
Yeah. Wise and good with money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Luther has a quote about marriage. I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's something like, Let the wife make the husband happy to come home, and let the husband make the wife sad to see him leave.
Yep.
All right. Verse 16 then. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. So again, the wise woman is not a slouch. She does have business acumen. She invests wisely. Again, these are kind of more masculine traits, especially in the time period when this is written. But the good wife doesn't just say, oh, that's man work, I'll let the husband take care of it. She's invested in the family and the prosperity of them all. She helps and does the work where she can. So she remains a good helper of the husband. She assists him to prosper the household. And so she helps her husband keep an eye out for good land that would be for sale. She helps to make sure that it's planted and tended to and taken care of so that's profitable for them. And this is a verse where it's not only just advice for women, but for all of us. We can recognize we're all workers in God's vineyard, and so we are all called to be workers out there witnessing to God's word, just as the wise woman is. Because again, the wise woman knows God's word, she knows her responsibility to share that with others, and so she will. 17, she dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. This is more militaristic language. The phrase she dresses herself has the connotation of one who, like arming yourself or putting your on your armor. So just as a soldier equips himself to get ready for battle, the woman suits up to get ready for her battle. Even though it's woman's work, it's really not for the weak, it's not for the faint of heart. It is hard work, and she does it diligently, and she makes sure that she knows what needs to be done and that she's prepared to do it. Verse 18, she perceives that her merchandise is profitable, her lamp does not go out at night.
Yeah.
So she sees to the house's goods, both the inside and the outside. So she makes sure that anything that's going out of the house is going to be for their benefit, whether that's goods that are being sold for direct profit or whether it's the members of the household who are going out to do work. She's making sure that they are properly equipped, they're clothed, they're fed, they're well rested, so they can go out and they can do their work well and they can turn a profit to bring back for the good of the household as well. So everything going out of the house, whether merchandise or people, is prepared to do what it needs to do for the benefit of the household. The stuff that stays inside the house is well managed and taken care of as well. So her lamp does not go out at night. She makes sure that the resources are properly allotted, so that all the oil lamps have enough oil to burn through the night, so if someone gets up in the middle of the night, they don't stub their toes because the lights went out because she forgot to refill them. So she makes sure that the resources are well managed so that they last as long as they need to, so they do the things that they need to do. And again, this is another verse we can apply universally as well. Jesus has the parable of the 10 virgins. 5 of them were prepared and they had enough oil to see them through the night so that when the bridegroom comes, they're ready to go and join the marriage feast. Half of the virgins were not prepared. They didn't think ahead. They only had enough oil for like an hour, and the bridegroom took like 3 hours. So when he arrives, they're like, we need to light our lamps. And everyone's like, sorry, the oil merchants are closed. Better luck next time. And so again, we all have this calling to be awake, to use what we have wisely and necessary. And again, you cannot tie it to the vineyard imagery. We have that responsibility to share the word around those as well. Always be ready to give a witness whenever the need arises, as Peter entreats us to do as well. Is that making sense?
Mm-hmm.
I have like 3 things crammed into one verse, but I'm talking really fast. Okay.
No worries.
All right, 19. She puts her hand to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. So this kind of ties back to 17 and how she suits up for the work that she's going to do. Now we're seeing the work that she's doing with the equipment that she has kind of suited herself up for. And this ties up to verse 18 with that merchandise that's going out of the house. And so she's industrious with the production of the household goods. She may not be working in the fields, but what they bring back from the fields, she's now going to spin it into thread and then weave it into cloth. Some of it can be sold for supplemental income. Some of it is used to make sure that everyone in the house is dressed, which we'll see in the coming verses. But again, the language used, how she stretches out her hand, that's the same kind of language you use to say, like, the soldier reaches out his hand and grasps his spear. It's getting that militaristic imagery for how the woman is the conqueror over the household to make sure that everything is done as it needs to be, showing the strength and power that the woman has, and how woman's work is just as valuable and necessary as the manly work of fighting and conquering and hunting and all of that jazz.
I have a question.
Yes.
This imagery, there is no more empowerment of women as much as this.
Yeah.
Yet, everybody's talking about how misogynistic the Bible is.
Yeah.
What's that deal? Like, they pick and choose what, like, they want to be offended.
The problem is that after like 70 or 80 years, however long it's been of feminism, people deny the fact that men and women are different. Because that's what third wave feminism has really turned into, is a misunderstanding of what equality actually means. Or maybe it is the right understanding of what equality means, however you want to look at it. So the goal of third wave feminism is to say that men and women are absolutely equal, as in there's no distinction. Anything you can do, I can do just as well, if not better. And so, which really does mean any denial of biological reality, because it's just a simple fact that men tend to be stronger than women, men tend to be taller than women. That's just how it is. And so, are there women who can be just as good as firefighters and who can lift as much as a man? Yeah, probably a couple, but the vast majority of women, like if I'm in a burning building and I know someone's going to come to rescue me and all I can know about my potential rescuer is if it's a man or a woman, I'm going to hope the man comes to get me, because he's much more likely to be able to actually pick me up and carry me out of the house. That's just the biological reality. Yeah. So what the first wave feminism was asking for equality between men and women in terms of rights and dignity, and saying, yeah, we're both human beings. We both deserve human dignity. We both deserve to be able to provide for ourselves and all of that, and that's cool. But by the time we get to third wave feminism, it's changing it to the equality in the sense of we're actually equal. We're interchangeable. There's no real difference between men and women. And so anytime you have anything recognizing there's a difference between men and women, men tend to be the farmers, tend to be the hunters, tend to be the soldiers, because that's just kind of how we're wired, and women tend to be the domestic laborers, where again, we're recognizing they're both equal, they're equal in dignity, they're both necessary, they're both praiseworthy. That's what the Bible's trying to say here. But third wave feminists see this and they're saying, oh, you're saying there's men's work and women's work, and women can't do the men's work and men can't do the women's work. This is all misogynistic. It's just
no man on earth will say, I can do childbirth better than a woman.
Well, nowadays.
Oh yeah, some people do.
Yeah, now it's a crazy wall, but it's...
Aww. Oh, that is a nice smile.
And then that. Yeah, it's just that shift of the equality that you're actually supposed to be looking for. And again, that's why everyone says that abortion is a women's rights issue, is because that's how you derive equality, is by turning women into men, because men don't give childbirth. Let's make it so women can not have to give childbirth if they don't want to. But you're not making them equal. All you're doing is you're making men sloppy, and you're making women into bad men. They can't do it as well just because they're not men. Yeah.
Nope.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Very cute. But yeah, it's just again, watch the Bierman study on women and men.
Yeah.
He'll give you 8 hours of the explanations. Or verse 20. Hi, baby. Verse 20. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. So again, we've had plenty of proverbs talking about how we're supposed to show love and care for the poor, and so the wise woman who has this wisdom likewise is going to help care for the poor. She's not just only concerned with her own household, she's concerned for those outside as well. Just as the wise ruler is called to show justice for the poor, the wise woman knows that she should help care for the poor. She gives charitably, she gives as she can and makes sure they're taken care of. 21 through 22 go together. She is not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet. She makes bed coverings for herself, her clothing is fine linen and purple. So again, this is drawing from the previous verses. She's been industrious, she hasn't been idle, she has been producing fabric. Some of it goes out to sell for profit for the good of her household, but some of it is directly for the good of the household. She doesn't have to fear bad weather because she has made sure her family is taken care of. They all have nice warm cloaks, so it doesn't matter if it gets snowed, if they get snowed in, because they're all taken care of. She's provided for her family. She helps to alleviate future worry. So it's not just she's okay if snow happens. It's she's not afraid of snow. She's not afraid of bad stuff happening because she knows she has prepared them adequately. And not only are they cared for, thanks to her wonderful womanliness, but they are cared for in luxury. So they're clothed in fine linen. That language is used to describe the white robes of those who have been washed in the blood of the Lamb in Revelation. So that's a victory, purity garment. It's the type of thing you wear. White clothes show dirt really easily, so it's not something you want to wear if you're going to be out working in the field where it's going to be dirty. It's something you can wear when you're in a position where you don't have to do lots of physical labor necessarily. Purple and scarlet are both very expensive dyes.
Pigments, yeah.
Purple is the color of royalty. You kind of had to be like a king or maybe the high priest to be able to afford purple dye because it was so expensive to produce. The scarlet likewise was a very expensive dye. I guess I couldn't find info for this time period, but by the time you get to the Roman Empire, like the Romans said that scarlet was second only to purple in its
beauty,
prestige.
Yeah.
I do know that when God is giving the instructions for the building of the tabernacle, he tells them to use purple and scarlet threads. Again, shows the luxury behind it. And so the woman is able to provide for her house, make sure they have nice clothes, and their clothes are dyed in purple and scarlet. That means she's providing for the household very well, basically. Verse 22, she makes bed coverings for herself, is worth noting as well. That phrase bed coverings doesn't appear anywhere else in the Old Testament except for in Proverbs 7:16, where the adulterous woman says, "I have spread my couch with coverings, colored linens from Egyptian linen." I think it's translated differently between these two verses. I don't know why. But the only other time bed coverings are mentioned is when the adulterous woman is trying to seduce the young man with her bed coverings. But here we're getting the contrast with the wise woman, the good wife, who has proper bed coverings. So the good wife, the one you're actually married to, who allows you to enjoy the marriage bed without breaking the sixth commandment. The wise woman creates a fine marriage bed for the husband. So now they have a union blessed by God. They're still within the reins of chastity because it's not extramarital. It's within marriage how God designed it to be. And then you get, the blessings of children that are supposed to come from that in a actual family unit, not a broken family unit like the adulterous woman would produce. So, try to make that as unawkward as I could. All right, verse 23. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. So the wise woman's husband is likewise well known and respected. Again, the city gates are where the elders sit and they adjudicate cases as they come up to them, as we saw in the book of Ruth on that study. And so the implication here is that she is part of the reason why the husband himself is well known and respected. So this is the ancient Hebrew equivalent of behind every great man, there's a greater woman pushing him towards greatness. However that phrase goes.
Well, if a man is not worried about his home and is
Yeah.
taken care of,
Yeah.
he has a lot more time to deal with bigger stuff.
Right. And so again, this is part of the blessing and benefit of having an excellent wife, is she enables you to then go on and do excellent things. So you are a well-known and well-respected member of the community because of the support you have back home that's helping you achieve greatness. So there's that praise for the woman there and how she helps her husband. You can also read this as kind of flipping the script. So while this whole poem is saying like, hey guys, this is a type of woman you should marry, it's also saying, hey women, make sure you marry a guy who's going to be well known and well respected by the elders as well. So it could be encouraging the wife to push her husband to greatness and recognizing that benefit you get in marriage as well. But it can also be advice to the women as well. You could be an excellent woman, but that doesn't let you off the hook entirely. You should be pursuing a good man, or in this case, encouraging your father to find a good man for marriage type of thing. There's maybe that implication there as well. Verse 24, getting back to the weaving she's done, she makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. So again, she's provided for her household with clothing, but she's also produced an excess of clothing that she can now sell to others, which again will further benefit the household. So she's sending material. She sends her family out well prepared to do their job to bring money back to the household, but she's also sending goods out to be sold and bring money back to the household. So she's just all sorts of wonderfulness in the excellent wife. 25, strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. So not only is she clothed with the fine fabric she's been providing for the household, but she's also clothed in virtues, in this case, strength and dignity. Mm-hmm. And again, strength is usually seen as a very masculine trait. Oh, straight masculine trait. He's such a strong man. But she is a strong woman as well. She's a good complement to the man of valor. Mm-hmm. Verse 26, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. So again, the wise woman is someone who has taken wisdom to heart, and as such, she knows the powers of the tongue, and she knows the various proverbs that we've had warning us against careless or foolish speech. And so she only speaks with wisdom. She teaches kindness. She uses her tongue for kindness as commanded by God, not for slander and gossip and all of the wildfires the tongue can create, as James would say. She knows God's word well. She's able to instruct the household in it. That's also part of opening your mouth with wisdom. And again, this draws us back to the opening of Proverbs, where parents are regularly reminded of their role to teach God's wisdom to their children. So James says, who can tame the tongue? Lemuel says, the wise woman can. Mm-hmm. So 27, she looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Again, this is more praise of her industriousness and her care of the household and her not just being a couch potato. Verse 28, her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. So again, as the opening of this poem has said, the good wife is a priceless treasure. And if she has married a good man and she's raised her children rightly so they have wisdom, they will recognize how much of a priceless treasure she is, and so they will notice this and they'll praise her as such, not like idolatrous praise, of course, but they're going to show proper appreciation for all that she does. They're going to recognize all of the things that she does for them. And if you do want to take this, some people can say this poem is all allegorical for the church. So, the church is the bride of Christ. And so the church is called to be the excellent woman in that regard. And this recognizes that we are the children of the church, and we praise the church for that role of being the bride of Christ as well. I'm really bad at I'm more of a prose guy, so I'm bad at analyzing poetry, but yeah, that's what I got from commentary. It makes sense. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Were you saying something?
No, I'm saying you're good.
29 then. And this is where the family does give that praise that I just said that they give. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. So this is the praise that the family gives her, as mentioned in verse 28. Now, there's lots of good women out there, but you're the best one. Now, that's an okay mom over there, but you're the best mom, and I love you. This is the praise you're supposed to give to your excellent wife if you're married. Verse 30, then, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. And so as we get to the close of the poem, we're summarizing the entire point. Beauty often is what first attracts a man to a woman, but that's not what a marriage should be based on. Again, the good wife, the priceless wife who will make your life better is the godly woman who recognizes the importance of wisdom, who has pursued and achieved wisdom. That's the kind of women that men should be looking out for.
Well, like right now, everybody's worried about nonsense that doesn't make.
Yeah.
Beauty goes away, money goes and comes. It's not guaranteed.
Right. Yeah. Want
But-
to be character.
But who you're living with or who are we living with is the most important thing, and whether they stick through it. I don't know why society makes it work in a way that, oh, they're in love in their 20s, she's pretty, he looks good, whatever.
Yeah.
Come 30s, end of 30s, beginning of 40s, oh, I can't live with this anymore. They divorce and
Yeah. Well, again, thanks to no-fault divorce and its prevalence and how we've made it intolerant to say divorce is a bad thing, and so everyone's kind of socially expected to acknowledge that it's a good thing. It's better for both parents to be happy than to be stuck together and not make each other happy. And so as that mindset is in the background, it's kind of the back of everyone's mind, that's shaped the way relationships are working out too. So, people still have the till death do we part vow in the marriage vows, but they don't really need it anymore, because nowadays people approach marriage with this is probably going to last like 5 to 7 years, and then we'll probably get sick of each other and get divorced, and we'll try again. And like they go into marriage expecting a divorce to happen already. I haven't seen this as much lately, but in like the early 2000s, people were writing articles saying like we shouldn't expect people to marry for life. Marriage should just be a contract with like a 5 to 7 year life term on it. And so that should be part of the marriage vows. Like, I agree to marry you for 5 years, and then after 5 years, we'll sit down and we'll renegotiate the contract and decide if we want to go another 5 years or if we should just split amicably or not. Like, that's the societal expectation now. People don't really think of getting married for life. They go into it thinking, yeah, I'll marry you for now, and then your looks will start to fade, and my habits will annoy you, and then we'll just split up, and I'll go upgrade to a younger model. Because again, as a society, we've completely lost sight of what marriage is in the first place. That's why I think they're voting on it today, the Defense of Marriage Act, which is really the Destruction of Marriage Act, because it's set up to constitutionally redefine what marriage is from this God-ordained union of man and woman as a fundamental building block of society, so that you can produce offspring and have responsibility for them and live together for their sake and make sacrifices for them, into what society has turned marriage into, which is very much, I like hanging out with you, let's pool our money together for the next 3 years until we get sick of each other, and then we'll split up and I'll find someone else I like hanging out with.
kind of like the Shiites. Shiites has that contract, which is entertainment marriage.
Yeah.
They sign a contract for social reasons, and it's guaranteed for so many certain period of time. It can be a month, it can be a year, or it can be a week even.
Yeah.
But so it's legal according to the Sharia law. They have to establish that contract, and it's guaranteed with money. Like somebody is gonna, in the end of it, pay that, which is technically prostitution.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's the way you legalize it and make it acceptable. It's the loophole. Like, I think, I don't know if this is a fact or a rumor, but I read once that there's somewhere in the Middle East where like they set up a brothel where they would have the contract marriage thing. So it's like you go in and you pick your hooker and you would like sign a contract saying, okay, we're married for the day, and then you would do your thing, and then you would have a divorce afterwards. But because they were technically married,
it's legal.
Yeah, it was legal. It was in Sharia law. They weren't really committing adultery.
I think that was in Cairo
Okay, yeah.
because they had those in Cairo
Yeah.
when I was there.
All right, let's bring this home with verse 31.
All right.
Aren't you glad you came tonight, Caesar?
Yes.
All right, 31. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. So again, this is the final reminder for men. Your wonderful, wise wife is such a precious treasure. I love you, honey. Not only should you be rewarding her and providing for her, as is your husbandly duty to your wife, but you should make sure you're giving her praise and make sure that you're doing it publicly so other people know how wonderful she is. Let her works praise her in the gates. So don't just say, I love you, honey, but like go to the city gates where everyone is and everyone can hear how you're talking to her and say, I love you, honey, there, so everyone recognizes you think she's a pretty good person. Not to give her an inflated ego or anything, but if you really love your wonderful wife, you want everyone to know it. You don't want to hide it. You don't want to make her question your feelings towards her.
Well, good words make good feelings.
Yeah.
It's nice to say something good.
Yeah. So yeah, praise in the gates was the most public praise you could give a person because again, that's where everyone's going in and out of the city. That's where you have the largest crowd. That's where the elders are sitting there gossiping about all the events going on. And again, this is the praise that is given to Ruth. She's praised in the gates as a worthy woman during that whole showdown between Boaz and the unnamed kinsman redeemer. And so the poem opens and closes with references to Ruth, who again, if Solomon is the author of the poem, he is a descendant of Ruth, so he's praising his ancestor. And we know now Ruth is a link in the chain to Christ because she's his great grandmother. But she is that praiseworthy woman who gets brought into the promise of Israel out of her faithfulness to God. She's from the outside, but she's brought in and she shows great faithfulness. She is the great worthy woman. She's kind of the model of biblical womanhood for us to follow. And she's kind of the example of the Proverbs 31 woman according to this poem. All right. I know I talked fast, but I barely had anyone to interrupt me. So, any questions, comments, concerns? Anyone online say anything?
Nope.
Anyone watching online?
Yeah, there's 3 people.
Cool beans. All right, so that has been Proverbs. These all should be online, so if you missed one, you can go back and watch that. But we got through the whole book. Finally, I'm dropping my papers. Next week, like I said, will be Thanksgiving Eve service at 7, and then we'll be in Advent with midweek services at 7 as well, with Pollock at 6. So come for those, and then probably mid-January we'll start the midweek Bible studies again and look at Job and round out the Old Testament wisdom literature books and then see what comes after that. So thank you for joining me on this journey. Sorry I get long-winded and distracted and all of that, but
No worries.
it's just what I do. So we'll pray us out and we'll get out a little bit early tonight. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of wisdom, that you give it to us from on high, but that you have also given it to us in the books of the Bible, that we might study it and know your word from there. We ask that you will continue to be with us and your Holy Spirit to us to give us understanding as we continue to study your word, so that we might grow in our knowledge of you and our relationship to you and live according to your precepts, that we would walk on the path of righteousness and show your love to the world. Please be with us as we go out and watch over us until we can once again come here and gather in your name, in which we pray.
Amen.